there's been audiobooks for decades. Then sometime within the last decade, Audible started to commission full-blown, instead of just making an audiobook, like actual getting multiple actors to act out different parts within the book and making it slightly more like a TV show or movie. Is that kind of what we're talking about here?
Yeah, we got to get away from calling it a book because it's not a book. I call it audio drama, I guess, because it's serialized episodes. It's much more like TV. It's sort of like old-fashioned radio plays, but with multiple episodes. The first one I ever sold was this one that I wrote with James Patterson called The Coldest Case. We got Aaron Paul to star and Kristen Ritter and Beau Bridges. It's a great cast. It took a year and a half to get that deal done because Patterson's publisher were unclear at that point what the difference was between an audio drama and an audio book. And if it was an audio book, well, that might cannibalize his audiobooks. I think the fact that we're even defining it is just reinforcement of what a tiny, strange little niche of the podcast world these things occupy.
Hello, I'm Simon Owens, and this is The Business of Content, the show about how publishers create, distribute, and monetize their digital content. For years, Hollywood writer Aaron Tracy built his career inside the traditional television system, writing for shows like Law & Order and navigating the endless cycles of pilots, canceled series, and development purgatory that defines much of the TV business. But over the last several years, Tracy has quietly carved out a very different kind of entertainment career, producing serialized audio dramas for platforms like Audible and iHeart. Along the way, he's worked with everyone from Aaron Paul to Lizzy Caplan to Glenn Powell, helping pioneer a form of storytelling that sits somewhere between television, audiobooks, and podcasting. In a recent interview, Tracy explained why audio dramas offer writers far more creative freedom than television, how he packages and sells narrative shows to platforms like Audible and iHeart, and the surprisingly lean production process behind large-scale audio series. If you want to listen to an audio version of this show, subscribe to The Business of Content wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're watching this on YouTube, gently tap on that subscribe button so you can continue watching interviews with the world's most successful media entrepreneurs. Okay, let's jump into the interview. Hey Aaron, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. You had emailed me out of the blue with a question about podcasting, and I looked at your website, and it looks like you've produced some really awesome narrative podcasts. So I really just want to dive into that and really just understand how that whole process works and how it works for you as kind of as an entrepreneur. I've had a lot of owners of podcast agencies on the podcast, but they're fully producing the podcasts, or a lot of them are distributing the podcasts themselves, monetizing themselves. From what I understand is you act a little bit more like a Hollywood producer, where you're packaging shows and stuff like that and then selling it to a podcast network of some sort, like Audible or Spotify or something like that. We'll get into all that. First, I'd just love to start with just hearing about kind of the genesis of your career. Were you always in audio? Were you doing some other kind of form of journalism before founding this company? What was kind of the lead up to you launching this audio studio?
Yeah, no, I've never really done journalism. I was a TV writer. So I wrote on a bunch of different shows, stuff. For whatever reason, most of them had the word law in the title. The only one that people would have heard of is Law & Order SVU, which I loved writing on, and it brought me to New York, which is where I've stayed. And then sort of transitioned to audio drama, which is a lot like TV writing, honestly. It's TV writing without the visuals. And I started doing that for Audible about 5-6 years ago. I do a lot of shows with James Patterson, the novelist, mostly thrillers, but I've now done something like 13 series, I think, of these various audio dramas for Audible and for iHeart. And I love them. I really fantastic. It's night and day for me. The sort of quality of life, the quality of the creative aspect of it, the enjoyment of it in audio versus TV. So I've really stuck with it. And then kind of transitioned this year. I don't know if it transitions. I'm still writing a bunch of audio dramas, but added, let's say, this new show, The Secret World of Roald Dahl, which is nonfiction narrative, which I'm hosting and which I really love.
Yeah. So you were had you gone to Hollywood, or did you get these jobs in New York where you were in a writer's room with other writers? They were we need to write 24 episodes of a TV show for a season. And you were in that kind of dynamic before.
I was in that kind of dynamic. Yeah. Moved to Hollywood after grad school. that's kind of what you got to do. I also teach TV writing and podcast writing right now. And my students always ask me what they should do after graduation. It's much, much less so now in the post-COVID era. But back when I was doing it, you had to be in LA. It's just, you moved to LA. And for me, it's like I was sitting at dinner one night with my buddy Alex, and an agent walked over to the table that knew Alex, and Alex introduced me, and that's how I got my first agent. Like, it's just in the water supply out there. So I moved out there. I got an agent, I got a manager, I got a lawyer, I got a writing partner. And then, like I said, Law and Order brought me back here, which was great because I'm much more of a New Yorker than Los Angelino.
And is that just like a matter of like writing spec scripts and then getting the agent to just get you into a writer's room, or like what's that kind of initial segue? Because obviously before you're in a writer's room, you've never written for a an actual on the air TV show before. Like, how do you make that kind of cross that kind of blood brain barrier into the actual writer's room?
So there's no one way to do it. I wish it was more like being a lawyer or a doctor, or like there was a clear apprenticeship or a clear pathway. There's not. If you ask 100 different writers how they broke in, they will give you 100 different stories. For me, it was that agent that I mentioned that I met at dinner with my friend Alex one night. He got me the writer's assistant job. He got me an interview for the writer's assistant job on a Fox show. It was the Friday night at 9 p.m. slot on Fox. It was this truly terrible mystery show, thriller show. And I was the writer's assistant, which means I sit in the writer's room and I listen to everyone and I take tons of notes, and then I clean the notes up and I send them to all the writers afterwards. And I basically do whatever the writers need me to do. And we worked so hard on it. And then I remember it was my first time in a writer's room, so I'm like learning how this goes. But like people are working, 10, 12-hour days, and then in production, it's totally nuts. And we premiere, and USA Today says, if you're looking for the worst show of the new season, look no further. And we immediately got canceled. And that was my introduction. But I met some writers. I learned how it works. The showrunner brought me onto his next show as the writer's assistant. So I did it again. That show also got canceled, but that's just kind of how it goes. And then you slowly work your way up. You keep writing, you keep showing people your stuff. You keep getting on shows that get canceled. And then eventually, for me anyway, I decided to start writing my own scripts and creating my own packages and started selling pilots. And so I sold a lot of pilots to a lot of different studios, and one got made, which was fantastic. And I did it with my hero, Rob Reiner, who was an executive producer on it. Great experience. I got another show made on a platform that probably no one's ever heard of called Crackle, which was Sony's streamer, their version of Netflix. And that was great, but it's lots of, two steps forward, one step back, and so forth. And audio has been very different. In audio, what you write is going to get made. And especially at places like Audible and iHeart, it's going to get made at the highest level. It's going to have a good budget, and it's going to have a big A-list star at the center of it. And the production value is great. I just kind of love it.
Yeah, so it seems like a lot of jobs in Hollywood, you start off as an assistant, and it's almost like an apprentice program where you get to whether it's a production assistant or something like that, where you're not actually directing the movie, but you're maybe an assistant to the director or the producer or something like that, and you get to see how the sausage is made, and then you make connections, and then eventually you just kind of work your way up until you actually are in that role that you're ultimately trying to get to.
That's absolutely one path. I know plenty of other paths. Some people write a short story and an agent gets it sold to a studio and they get a job off that. I know people who have gone into various workshops like the Warner Brothers Writers Workshop and just gotten staffed right out of there. Or people have written spec scripts, spec features that end up getting to the right producer and getting made. I mean, there's so many different ways to do it. Which is the good and the bad. It feels wide open, but at the same time, it's a very, very closed system right now. It's very difficult right now, as your listeners probably know, with the consolidation of the studios and the shorter episode orders with streaming. There are fewer jobs. for a whole host of reasons. It's a very tricky time.
So tell me about this transition into audio. So like I think you used the word the phrase audio dramas. Was that that was the word you used, right?
Did I make that up? I wonder if I coined that. I'm thrilled. I don't know if other people use that term. Do people not use that term?
Well, I just want to define it for the audience. So like my understanding is like obviously there's been audiobooks for decades. Then sometime within the last decade or so, or maybe my timing is off, Audible started to commission full blown, instead of just making an audiobook, like actual getting multiple actors to act out different parts within the book and making it slightly more like a TV show or movie. Is that kind of what we're talking about here?
Yeah, we got to get away from calling it a book, because it's not a book. It's I call it audio drama, I guess, because it's serialized episodes. It's much more like TV. It's sort of like old-fashioned radio plays, but with, multiple episodes. So yeah, Audible is definitely the biggest player. iHeart does make some, and there are other companies that make some. Those two platforms, iHeart and Audible, seem to make them at the highest budgets. But yeah, they're really great. Audible makes a ton of them. The first one I ever sold was this one that I wrote with James Patterson, called The Coldest Case. And really fantastic. We got Aaron Paul to star, and Kristen Ritter and Beau Bridges, and really Mark Paul Gosselaar and Alexis Bledel. It's a great cast. It took a year and a half to get that deal done, because Patterson's publisher and several other people involved in the deal making were unclear at that point what the difference was between an audio drama and an audio book. And if it was an audio book, well, that might cannibalize his audiobooks. Now, an audiobook is simply a reader, a narrator, an actor reading the book, right? A book that is published for the most part. These, as you say, are very different. They're 30-minute episodes, big casts, big soundscapes. In an audiobook, when there's a cocktail party, you just hear the narrator reading the prose. Right here, you actually hear the glasses clinking and the champagne uncorking. And the best of them have really elaborate designs, sound designs. So yeah, they're very different. I think the fact that we're even defining it is just reinforcement of what a tiny, strange little niche of the podcast world these things occupy. The Coldest Case, that first show that I mentioned, it has something like 25,000 customer reviews on Audible, which I think means it's got to be such a giant hit, because I look at some of my other shows that I know for sure are hits, and they have a fraction of that many, customer reviews. And we did get 2 sequels. I'm actually in production right now on The Coldest Case 3, which has been really great. But yeah, even though they clearly, a lot of Audible customers like those shows and listen to them, they've not quite hit the mainstream.
And there are such things as serialized fiction podcasts, which are probably kind of similar, but that also have sound design and stuff like this. But these, what you call audio dramas, they're usually not running on like free podcast apps. They're usually part of an Audible subscription or for one-off purchases and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, they are made by other companies like Realm and iHeart, and there are plenty of other places, and there are lots of independent audio dramas, people who are making them on their own.
So in terms of that first like audio drama you did, like you said, the niche or the format was so new that like they had to figure out how to make like a custom contract for it. How did you decide to do that? Did someone in Audible pitch you on it? Did someone on James Patterson's team? Like how did you start off doing that?
Yeah, so my TV agent set me on a meeting with Bill Robinson, who runs James Patterson's company, adapting his books for film and TV. And I had a great lunch with Bill. I like him a lot. I still work very closely with him. He's really smart and creative and thoughtful. And he pitched me a couple of Jim's books, because Jim comes out with so many books per year. And a lot of them are available. A lot of them are taken, of course. I mean, there've been so many TV shows and movies made out of the books, but there were a couple available that he pitched me. And I just kind of knew right away that I was not going to get this over the line, especially with me as the showrunner for TV. But a buddy of mine from college had a relationship with Audible. And so I teamed up with him, and together we took the idea to Audible. And to Jim's credit, I mean, I think at the time, he was an older guy. He is an older guy. He was excited about a new form. I mean, Jim Patterson, he has nothing left to prove, right? Like my favorite stat about him is 1 out of every 10 hardback books that are published, 1 out of every 10 are by James Patterson. But he was totally into it. He loved the idea of trying this new form. So he agreed, and we went to Audible. And like I said, it took a year and a half. But from there, it just really took off. And Audible made an overall deal with the Patterson Company. And now I've done, I want to say, 10 different series with Patterson for Audible, all thrillers, all with big stars and great soundscapes, and done with Broadway Video as the production company. Broadway Video is Lorne Michaels' company, and so it's been really great.
So what I understand is like it's so hard to get like a new TV show or like to actually go to series or a new movie actually produced. Yet there's so many like cats you have to herd with getting a star, getting a script, like the pilot, and then the pilot has to be greenlit. Since you had gone through all that, how did it compare, or how does it compare to getting an audio drama greenlit and up and running?
It's the best part. I right behind me is my dresser. In my dresser, I have a DVD that is worth $10 million. It is a pilot that I made for the USA Network, and we shot it. We made it. Obviously, it's on the DVD. They never picked it up to series, and this happens all the time. Right. So after all that hard work, all those millions of dollars spent, all the years of development, it's dead. Right. For audio drama, like I said, I've now produced, I think, 13 of these series. So like 130 episodes, give or take. 2 more I have written and gotten paid for, but they have not been made. So the ratio is incredible. And I'm embarrassed that I actually wrote 2 that didn't get made because the money is not so huge that if they do put the money into the writing, they should make it. Like the moving on to production is not a huge expense, especially compared to TV. So anyway, I wish those 2 had gotten made, but 13 out of 15 is great. It feels really good. And so, there were times over the past 5-6 years where I ended up writing 15, 16 pages of audio drama per day on my various shows because of various deadlines. In TV, sometimes I would be working on the same scene for months. It's a completely different animal. I'm not saying that that's bad about TV. Like, it's good to work something over and over again until you feel like it's in a place where it can be shot. But just as a human being, as a writer, it is just so much more satisfying to be able to write all this great content, to work on so many projects, to work with so many great actors, to actually have them get made versus TV, where it's a bit of the opposite. And then, to sort of answer your question, like when you make a TV show, there's 250 crew members. When you make an audio drama, there's roughly 5 crew members. So it's a much smaller, thing. It's a skeleton. Also, the executives, it's the same thing. When you write a TV show, you're going to get notes from your production company, your producers, your director, your cast, your studio, your network. And I'm sure I'm leaving out several people. In audio drama, it's the production company, maybe, and then it's an executive at the network, and that's it. So, I'm not saying, again, like notes aren't inherently bad. If you're working with a great producer who gives good notes, that's a wonderful thing to be able to, for free, get really smart feedback on your script. And, I've worked with really great producers and executives who have made my stuff better. But it's also pretty nice to be able to just like write something that gets made without too much interference and have it be your vision, your baby. That's the other thing. When I pitch a TV show, I would never just like come up with an idea and go pitch it, right? I would need to get IP. I need to work with a team to go, get the rights to a book or a board game. A partner and I were once given the rights to the board game Risk, right, to turn into a TV show. You need something like that these days to sell a TV show. In audio drama, I could have an idea in the shower and then go pitch it the next week, and it could end up, selling, which is like, that's great for creators. It's so much more freeing for creators and writers.
So some of the audio dramas you do are not based on pre-existing books.
No. Almost all my audio dramas are just original ideas. Even the ones I do with Patterson are not necessarily based on his books. They're just new ideas that sort of fit in his universe, that sort of make sense for his readers. And then the ones I do without him are, entirely just original ideas.
And what do you have to line up when you're doing that pitch? Is it just a summary? Like what do you have to be? What do you have to have ready when you're in the room for when you're pitching Audible or whatever? Like, do you have to have a star lined up or anything like that, or is it literally just an idea?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It's a little different from TV. I don't bring an actor in because Audible knows, and the other, iHeart and the other platforms know, they can kind of get whoever they want if they're willing to spend the money. Actors love doing audio dramas. So some of the stars of my shows have been like Glenn Powell and Greta Lee, and like I said, Aaron Paul and Lizzy Caplan. And you get these Maya Hawke, you get these amazing stars because they like not having to put on makeup, not having to put on a costume, coming in for 1 or 2 days, I would say 3 days at the most, and getting something done. And the money is good at these two networks. So the networks know that they're going to be able to get a star. So it's not particularly helpful to bring someone in unless it's the perfect person. What you want to bring in is an idea. You want to be able to pitch them on what the season can be. Here's the overall idea for the season. Here's where it's going to go. Here are a few twists and turns. Maybe here's what sort of episode 6 or 7 might look like. You want to have a clear idea of what the soundscape is going to be. They get pitched a lot of failed TV shows. TV writers who couldn't get their TV show to go, so they, want to save it by taking it to audio. And they don't like that, right? They want someone who's thinking audio first, understandably. So you want to really be able to make an argument about why this should be in audio, not in TV or film. And then sometimes you want to go in with a company. Like I said, Broadway Video does a lot of my shows. There's a company called Treefort that's great out there. Kelly and Kelly. There's a bunch of really great companies, and sometimes it's very helpful to have them on board so that the buyer will know that you're going to do this at the highest possible level.
And whereas like a TV show will often have a writer's room, is a audio drama usually just one person?
No, I almost always have writers' rooms. So I teach at Yale, and I often use former students or just former alums in my writers' room. And I pay them out of my fee. We do a writer's room. We sit around. We basically oftentimes just bat around ideas until we come up with the arc of the season. And, when I start the writer's room, I've already got the concept, right? I've already sold the idea for the show, the pitch for the show. So this is more about beating it out. Here's the twist in episode 3. Here's the character arc over the course of the season. Here's, where we're going to end. And so we do that for several weeks. Sometimes I really prefer it when it's New York or Brooklyn writers, and we can all just sit in a room together and use a whiteboard, which is great. But in the post-COVID world, a lot of writers have just, they've moved away, or obviously some writers are in LA. And so we can do it on Zoom. And that works well too. And it's a huge help. And then I usually go off and write all the episodes myself. But in a couple instances, I've farmed out episodes to people in the writer's room.
Yeah, and that's what I kind of understood how writer's room works, is like you get in there and you kind of put the scaffolding on it and the broad brush strokes, but it's somebody's responsible to do kind of the scene by scene, line by line type of writing.
Yeah. So any writer's room, when we take Law and Order, everybody sort of sits together and comes up with big themes for the season and character arcs for the season, and sort of here's the scaffolding. And then it's up to each writer to take responsibility for a story area, an outline, and a script. And all of those then need to be sort of passed in to the showrunner, who will often take a pass on it. And then the studio and the network have to sign off. And that's how it works. Audio drama, like I said, is a little bit different just because there are so many fewer gatekeepers. But it's similar in that we just sort of come up with the show together in the writer's room. And then usually it's me, but sometimes others contribute. We write all the scripts, and we get some notes from the executives, and we're off to the races.
And then are you doing directing, casting, all that other stuff, or is that also, are you hiring separate people to do that?
We almost always hire a casting director. I'm always surprised. I mean, for the lead roles, usually with Audible or with iHeart, we make the offer to whatever Glenn Powell or Aaron Paul or whoever it is, those top line people. The offer comes from the network. For the rest of the cast, we work with a casting director to come up with who makes sense. It's always sort of surprising to me, but really great how many auditions we get. We could put out a casting call, to the agencies and get back 50 to 100 auditions for like a tiny voice role that's gonna, someone who's gonna come in and work for an hour for not a lot of money. But I think actors really, really enjoy doing these shows, which is fantastic. And it's all my audio dramas. I have anywhere from 50 to 100 different roles. So we're hiring a lot of people, which is great. Whereas again, that's a big difference with an audio book, which is often just between 1 and 4 readers, usually just one reader. And then in terms of directing, oftentimes we bring in a director to direct it. I've worked with some great people, some great directors. Tyne Raffaelli directed my most recent show, Summer Breeze. She's a great theater director. I started directing with my show 10 Days, and I really enjoyed it. I often think that the writer makes a good director for these kinds of shows because they're 10 episodes, and like I said, there's not 10 different crew heads who can keep track of everything. So the writer really needs to keep track of everything, and that's kind of the most important thing for a director, in my opinion, especially when we don't have to worry about visuals. The most important thing is someone who can keep the whole show in their head, a vision for the whole show, a tone for the whole show. So since 10 Days, I've directed most of my shows. I'm directing the new season of The Coldest Case right now. And I really like directing. Directing is really fun, especially when you work with great actors. I find, I work like Richard Schiff was in my last show, and Richard Schiff is from The West Wing and one of my absolute heroes. I was too scared to direct him, right? Like, I'm not going to give Richard Schiff notes on how to deliver my script, my stupid, lines of my dumb thriller. I'm not going to do that. So he comes in and he does his thing, and I say, thank you so much. But then you work with sort of actors who are coming in just for an hour or two to play the roles that are, have sort of fewer lines, and they really want to have fun, right? They really want to work. They want to be directed. They want to, talk about motivation and try different stuff. And that can get really, really fun.
And are all the actors that are in scenes together, or are they in the same room with each other?
Good question. So no, which always shocks me. But basically I've done, of all of these 13 shows that I've made, I have only had actors together recording in a room on, I swear, like 4 or 5 different scenes. Otherwise, it's always actors just recording individually, which is similar to animation a lot of the time. If you have a good sound designer, no one will be able to tell that the actors were not in the same room. You need to have a good sound designer. You need to have someone who can really overlap the voices when necessary and make sure that the voices are, feeling like they're in the same scene sonically. But yeah, it's very doable. We hire oftentimes a reader, or I will just read, or my producer will just read opposite the actor who's being recorded. And, a couple times I have had the case where one of the actors in the scene gave a very different performance than the other actor, and it just doesn't match tonally. So I've had to bring the actor back to redo that scene. Which is obviously a pain. You never want to have to do that if you can avoid it. But for the most part, no, just actors recording individually, as long as the director is there to really keep the whole thing in their head and make sure that, the actors are giving the kind of performance that the scene requires, it works great.
But the actor has to come to you, like you can't put them in a studio and direct them remotely or something like that.
Oh no, it's almost entirely remote. Yes. So I just directed this morning. I was sitting here in Brooklyn, and the actor was in a studio in Los Angeles, And so I was on Zoom, and my producer, Lewis from Broadway Video, was on Zoom. And obviously in the studio, there was a sound engineer, and we just recorded that way. And that's very common.
What kind of stories lend themselves to audio dramas? Like, I know a lot of serialized fiction stories do, serialized fiction podcasts do, like found footage type stories where, like, it's like a scientist who was recording his experiments or, stuff like that. Is that what a lot of these are, or is there a narrator that's kind of like, guiding the listener through in between the dialogue, or how do you basically stand in for like the visuals?
Well, to take your second question first, I resisted having a narrator for the longest time. I always felt like it was a crutch, that, the audio drama, the characters, the scene work should speak for itself, that you don't need a narrator walking you through what's happening. Just because you don't have visuals, you should be able to explain in audio exactly what is happening. I think looking back, I was dumb to do that. I think I was just, I had heard a lot of bad narrators, and I realized you don't have to have a bad narrator, but it is often helpful when there are no visuals to have a narrator who can guide you. Now, again, it shouldn't be too expositional. It shouldn't be really painting a picture in a way that feels ham-fisted. But people who listen to audio dramas, especially at Audible, often are used to listening to audiobooks. And in audiobooks, the narrator is guiding you. So it just makes sense that narrators would work well in audio drama. So I do much more of it now. I've stopped resisting that. And then your other question, what makes for, what kinds of genres work best?
Well, I have a question about the narrator. Is the narrator usually the main character speaking in first person, or is it a third person omniscient narrator?
I've never done a third person omniscient narrator because I think that is where you can get into trouble. That's where it can really feel like voice of God, kind of hackney and just full of exposition. So no, for me, it's always been the internal monologue of the main character. Lizzy Caplan in one of my shows, and Aaron Paul in one of my shows. And
she's amazing at that, because have you seen
Fleischman?
Fleischman is
yes.
Oh God, one of my favorite shows. So
yes,
good.
I love that show. I kept thinking about that when she was narrating. She's so good at it. So in terms of genres, I hesitate a little bit with this question just because, well, let me say, the genres that have worked best traditionally in audio drama are sci-fi, horror, and thriller. But I don't think that has to be the case. I wrote a romantic comedy that got made for Audible last year, with Kelly Ripa in the lead, and Ali Sheedy and a bunch of great people, called Summer Breeze. I think that worked great. There are lots of different kinds of genres that I really think can work. I just think for whatever reason, we're in a place where thrillers and sci-fi and horror, the writers of those have really gravitated towards audio drama. But yeah, I am eager to break out of that. Audio drama still has not had its Mad Men, its Sopranos, like the show that came along and basically showed everybody else how this can be done, what the potential is. There were a few really good ones early on in this new wave of audio dramas. Gimlet had a few, like Homecoming, which was really terrific. But since then, I can list a bunch of really great ones, but there's not been that one show that got everybody talking. And so, yeah, I hesitate to say what you can't do. But yeah, so far, those three genres have been the most popular.
And what goes into kind of the premiere and promotion of the once it goes live? Like, obviously with a movie, you think of the actual movie premiere where all these like famous people and influencers go. Then the main actors go on every single podcast. They go on late night and stuff like that. What does that look like for the audio drama?
It's all across the board. I mean, I've never had a show had a premiere. I wouldn't even know what that looks like, right? Because would everybody just go and sit down and close their eyes and listen? I don't know. Audio drama in a group feels kind of funny to me, but I do wish we should be creative enough to come up with something to stand in for a premiere, for sure. After the handful of people that work, plus the whole cast that work really hard on this. In terms of marketing, it's all across the board. For that show, The Coldest Case, the marketing was amazing. The two leads, Aaron Paul and Kristen Ritter, did interviews in Rolling Stone. There was a piece in Newsweek. Aaron Paul went on Stephen Colbert to talk about the show. There was huge billboards on the Sunset Strip in LA and on Montauk Highway. And some of my other shows have had big billboards at Grand Central Station. So Audible often will go all out with marketing, which is really helpful and great. Other shows, the marketing is often just the cast going on other podcasts or no marketing at all. For Audible, they've got such a good algorithm. They will send details about the new show to all the people who subscribe to Audible who they think might listen to it based on their past listening. And I think that's super helpful. And also just being on the Audible homepage, I think is really helpful. But no, I haven't come up with any sort of outside the box ideas. I can tell you for my Roald Dahl show, I think the most helpful thing in terms of marketing it, and I think part of why it's done so well, is I myself have gone on tons and tons of podcasts to promote it. And I mean, I'd be curious what you think, because I feel like you're more of an expert in this. But I think that just going on other podcasts to talk about it, and then people are already in their podcast app. And so they can just, with their thumb, very quickly get to your show. I think that that's the best way to promote.
Yeah, I 100% agree. The best way to promote your podcast is to have it promoted on somebody else's podcast, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I really, which is nothing, right? Like, I think that's more helpful than going on late night with Jimmy Fallon or the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, right? It's genuinely like going on a podcast is, even if it's a much smaller audience, that's how you do it.
So what is the actual discourse in the people who consume it online? Like, right now there's like the show The Boys that's like, having its final season, and like if I open up threads, like I can see tons of posts of people like commenting on, like, I think a lot of people don't really like this most recent season, and that you can see it in the dialogue. Same thing with Stranger Things. These shows, like, not every show gets that level of discourse, but a lot of them do any of these, like, I don't know how much you actually hang out on social media or you have somebody compiling what people are saying, but like, is there vibrant discussion online, or is this still too niche or small of a community to where you don't see as much of that?
Yeah, the answer is I really don't know, because I don't go online in those kinds of places. I'm not on social media, so I stay away from those. There are, like I said, on Audible, The Coldest Case has tons and tons of customer reviews, and people leave comments, and all my shows, that's the case for. And so I do sometimes read the reviews and look at what people thought overall. But as that's not a conversation. That's just one person leaving a review without anybody talking back to them. On my newest show, I went once onto Reddit, because I saw that there was a big thread with a lot of people chiming in about it. That was a bad idea. I'm not going to go back and do that again. I don't really know what the conversation is.
So you haven't seen anybody forward you like fan art, or there's not like convention activity where there's like fandoms that are wanting to line up to, dress as these characters or something like that?
Not that I've seen. A couple of the actors in a few of these shows have said to me that they've gotten funny communications from fans about the show. No, for me, because I'm not on social media, it's very easy to find my email online, though, which is fine. And so I've gotten tons of emails. At the height of the Roald Dahl show, I was getting a bunch of emails every day. And it was mostly just people thanking me for the show, or telling me their own Roald Dahl story, or saying something nice. And I did get some fan art. And so that's really cool. I mean, that's really nice to hear directly from fans. So again, that's not like a conversation, with people talking to each other about what they think. But it is nice when you put something out into the world, to like actually see that it's landing with people, to actually get feedback. With my Audible shows, I never get emails. And I think that's because the Roald Dahl show, it's my voice. I'm hosting it. It's just me. And so I think people feel, like it makes more sense to reach out to me when I'm behind the scenes and just the writer, and director of the Audible shows. nobody bothers to write me. And so it does feel a little bit like I work really hard on them. I write all 10 episodes. I, direct them. We get them out into the world, and then it just kind of disappears into the ether. But so it goes. Like if I enjoyed the process, if I had fun directing the actors or had fun writing it, then it's still a great way to make a living.
So let's talk about the podcast, because it seems to be a pretty strong departure from what we've been talking about so far. Obviously, it's available on free podcast apps, and then it's not actors. It is somewhat narrative in nature, but it's you hosting. If anyone's listened to a kind of narrative nonfiction podcast, they like Missing Richard Simmons or different stuff like that, like they know what I'm talking about. How did you decide that you wanted to do something that was a little bit more traditionally podcasty versus something that's like almost closer to a TV show? Like what was kind of what led up to that?
Honestly, I think I got just a little bit burnt out from all these audio dramas, just writing 130 episodes of audio drama. It's like, I think I needed a little bit of a break. And also, like I said, I don't love that it occupies this funny little niche corner of the podcast world. I wanted to do something that was a little bit more mainstream. And so when my agent told me that Imagine, Ron Howard and Brian Grazer's company, was looking for sort of biographical podcasts for their deal with iHeart, I immediately went to them with Roald Dahl. And then it was my two producers there, Nathan Clokey and Cara Welker. It was their idea for me to host, which I wasn't sure about at first, but ended up really, really liking, and I enjoyed that process. And my model was, my favorite podcast has always been You Must Remember This, Karina Longworth's show. And that is just Karina having done a ton of research, talking into a microphone, weaving a really interesting story or cultural commentary, talking about a movie or a trend. So that's what I aim to do. And yeah, it was just such a blast. I put a lot of, I listened to a lot. I thought about a lot of my other favorite podcasts, like Missing Richard Simmons is a favorite for sure. Dan Dabersky is fantastic. And Joel Lovell, his producer, they're both just really smart podcast people. So I definitely mimic some of that. Jad Abumrad, I think, is brilliant. So I tried to sort of mimic him a little bit with what he does with clips. I think is fantastic. So yeah, I did all of that, and it worked out.
And was that like a vastly different muscle to flex? Because I haven't listened to all of but it's like you think like you're going out and you're doing interviews or collecting research, and then you're kind of pulling that together in an interview here, an interview there, a piece of research there with some narration. Like, it's a lot different than just doing a very structured script where everybody has their line and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I didn't find it that different. The biggest part, the most work for the Roald Dahl show was writing the scripts. And I call them scripts. It's just, instead of having 5 actors, it's one actor. It's just me. But it was, the research part is always my favorite part of the process on any script that I write. I've written a lot of TV that have been based on real people. I wrote a show for Lionsgate about J. Edgar Hoover, and I wrote a show for A&E about Audrey Hepburn, and doing the research, reading all the books, and compiling the research into outlines and then into scene work is always my where I enjoy the process the most. And this was very much like that. I went off, I've got 11 books about Roald Dahl sitting over there, and I talked to a lot of different people and watched a lot of clips, and it was the same sort of idea where I would sort of start to figure out how to tell the story episodically, and then put the research into different scenes, and then just sort of write the scenes. I very much wrote it with scene work, even though it's just sort of my, not quite unbroken voice, because I do have a lot of clips, but it's my voice throughout. But I broke it all up into scenes. And so it's actually very similar. And it's a kind of writing that I really like. But overall, like, I really enjoy, it's a nice time to be a writer. It's a nice time when you can do so many different kinds of things, right? Write TV, write features, write books, write audio dramas, write nonfiction narrative shows, and you're kind of always using the same muscle.
And you sold this show to like a network or something, right?
Yeah. So Imagine has a deal with iHeart. So we sold it to iHeart. Yeah. And iHeart's been great too, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're responsible for monetizing it, putting in the ads and all that kind of stuff. You were mainly just having to focus on the story part, not any part of the business side.
Well, no. So the way it worked was iHeart gave me through Imagine gave me a budget. So I have a little audio company called Parallax, and so they gave Parallax the budget, and then I just started hiring people. So I hired a great producer named Matt Schrader, and I hired a fantastic sound designer and editor, Mark Henry Phillips, who also helped with the score. And the three of us really went off and made it. I went off and wrote all the scripts, and then me, Matt, and Mark would get online to record it.
And then you kind of hinted at this already, but like, what was it like to really? So I think it topped, it did really well on the podcast charts. It was featured on New and Notable for Apple. So what was that experience like releasing that compared to when you're doing these audio dramas?
Yeah. Like I said, it was much more satisfying. When I release an audio drama, I go and I look at the comments and I make sure we're, a 4.5 or a 4.6 or something like that. And I'll feel terrible if we drop to a 4.2, and I'll feel great if we get to a 4.8, and I'll read some of the comments and get very sad when people write mean things, and of course you remember the mean stuff much more than you remember the positive stuff. But yeah, that's kind of it. And then it's sort of off, in its own world, and you just hope that people find it over, because it'll always be in Audible's library. So hopefully people will find it. With the Roald Dahl show, it was different. It feels much more like just like a living organism. I ended up, like I said, going on lots of different podcasts to promote it. Rolling Stone, there was a reporter at Rolling Stone who loved the show and called us up and asked to do an interview with me. And the same with like Variety and a bunch of other places. And so it feels like more of a conversation. It feels like it's making a little bit more of an impact. At a certain point, we have been the number one documentary and the number one series on the Apple Podcast chart. But then we got to the number 4 show. So it was like The Daily, Joe Rogan, Crime Junkie, and us. And that felt great. Like I worked so hard on the show, and so did Matt and Mark. And it just feels so good to see that happen. And especially because it's a bit rare for limited series for that to happen. It's usually the always on shows that end up doing really well. So yeah, it's felt so good. And I'm so excited to do another season. I've enjoyed it so much.
So has that experience made you rethink like what you want to be doing over the next few years?
Yeah.
In terms of like, whether you want to branch more into more traditional podcasting, do an always on type show versus a narrative. Do you want to just stay in narrative? Like, how is that making you think about your business and what you want to be doing going forward?
Yeah, it has. It's really made me want to do more of this. I want to do a second season of The Secret World of and profile someone else. If it goes well, I want to do a 3rd and 4th season. I want to keep it going. I also love the idea of doing an always on show. Now, as you know, like 95% of always on shows are chat shows. And I don't think I have any interest in doing a chat show. I would want to do more of a storytelling show, which is much harder to produce 50 shows a year. But I have a couple ideas that I think might work, and I think that would be really fun. But I haven't left the audio dramas behind. I'm directing The Coldest Case 3 right now, and I'm in the middle of writing my next thriller for Audible that hopefully we'll make later in the year. And then I also have an audio book coming out from Macmillan in January 27th of next year. And so again, that's like it's a book. It's not quite an audio drama, but it's also not quite a book because it's an audio book. So it will never be in bookstores. And we do have a cast reading it, but I very much wrote it like I write my audio dramas, with the one big difference being that I gave the narrator a lot more to do. So it feels a little bit more like a book. So I'm still super into audio, but I do like working in all these different kinds of forms.
Do you have like a core team at Parallax, or is it just like you and then you just hire contractors when you're ready to like gear up for a show or something like that?
Yeah, I don't keep anyone full-time on staff because I never know. It's so hard right now. You never know when your next project is gonna come, when it's gonna go, and you wouldn't want to keep people from other work. So I've been working entirely with contractors, and I may regret that. Like, I will be so sad if Mark Henry Phillips can't do season 2 of the Roald Dahl show. But that's sort of the model that's been working.
So the reason you reached out to me and we got connected in the first place is because you were asking me about like video podcast. Obviously, that's where a lot of the podcast industry is going. To date, there aren't a lot of what you would consider like narrative video podcasts, and because it's kind of like hard to do because when it's just a chat show, it's just you and me. That's the visual. But when it's a narrative show and you're describing something, you feel obligated to put something on the screen that's moving and illustrating whatever it is that is. So I know it's still early and you haven't made any decisions, but like, what are you thinking about video and whether you want to incorporate it into what you do?
Yeah, I'm so torn. That's why I reached out to you. I need help. I go back and forth every day. My feeling is you're absolutely right. Everything you said is right. But there are some examples of narrative shows that are working on video. If you go on Netflix and you look at The Psychology of Your 20s, that's just the host talking with 2 camera angles. As far as I can tell, no archival photos, no archival video. Another show, Dissect, also on Netflix, right? It's just him talking to camera with a black background. And once in a while, they do throw up an archival photo or clip, but it's very minimal. No one has figured out yet, I'm guessing you agree, but I'm curious. No one, I think, has figured out yet a good visual style for a podcast. Even the ones that have the most money behind them. If you look at the Ringer shows, Bill Simmons shows, it doesn't feel like they've nailed a visual identity yet. And it's hard. I don't have an idea for how to do these kinds of visuals without costing a fortune. I don't know what the right answer is. And we're not going to have a fortune to do video if we choose to do it in season 2. But I just worry that if you choose not to do video, you're going to be a dinosaur. If everything else is video, or if 80% of podcasts are video and you're not, is Apple going to spotlight you? Is Spotify going to spotlight you? Are you just going to have much less of a reach? I really don't know.
Okay, Aaron, those were all the questions I had for you. Where can people find you online?
Like I said, I'm not on social media, but people can check out my website, listentoparallax.com, to see all my shows and the press and stuff like that. And The Secret World of Roald Dahl does have an Instagram presence. So if you want to follow us there, you can get updates on what's going on with the show.
Awesome. This is a lot of fun. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun.